Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we've got some incredibly fascinating and honestly highly volatile global market data to unpack. Today, we're diving straight into the latest intelligence from PolymerBazaar. Specifically, we're looking at their polypropylene, or PP, weekly report for the final week of June 2026. Whether you're literally in the trenches of procurement, managing supply chains, or you're just kind of fascinated by how global commodity markets shift under pressure, you're definitely going to want to stick around for this one.
Okay, let's dive into this. The central paradox we're trying to unravel today is this. With global demand just visibly shrinking across the board, what exactly is driving the wild price volatility we're seeing? I mean, you'd think low demand would just equal a smooth, predictable drop in prices everywhere, right? Well, not exactly. As the PolymerBazaar data shows us, the friction between dull demand, bizarre freight anomalies, and local supply chain quirks makes the reality far more complex.
So here is our roadmap for the day. Number 1, global polymer market overview. 2, US and Europe market slump. 3, Turkey and China demand shifts. 4, spotlight on the Indian bazaar pulse. And 5, a strategic procurement outlook.
Section 1, Global Polymer Market Overview, a sluggish start.
Looking right at the data from PolymerBazaar, the dominant theme across almost every major market they analyzed is, well, a synchronized global slump. Buyers across the globe are cautiously putting on the brakes. We are seeing a widespread stalling in global polypropylene procurement. It isn't just one isolated region acting hesitant, it's this collective defensive posture from buyers who are navigating a lot of economic ambiguity. They're basically holding their cards very, very close to their chests.
Section 2, US and Europe market slump. Western markets stagnate.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how that global hesitation is perfectly illustrated when we zoom in on the West. Check out the stark contrast in exactly why these two massive markets are stalling. In the US, buyers are outright postponing their procurement because they're heavily banking on imminent price declines. They're playing the waiting game. But over in Europe, demand is just as sluggish, but for a slightly different, more systemic reason. European buyers are waiting for the July propylene contract price settlement to finalize. So two different rationales, but the exact same result, a completely frozen B2B market.
And looking at the US data, wow. Those buyers expecting a decline, they hit the nail on the head. We're talking a massive price drop of $135 per metric ton for US homopolymer grades, bringing it all the way down to $1,170 per metric ton. Copolymer grades took a similar hit, declining $130 down to $1,235 per metric ton. But here is the crazy paradox. While demand is incredibly dull and prices are literally plummeting, freight rates in the US are actually higher. It's a logistical headache that's actively squeezing margins.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic and Europe, we're seeing parallel, though slightly softer, drops. Demand stayed sluggish, and Europe saw declines of €40 per metric ton pretty much across the board. Homopolymer grades slid down to €1440 per metric ton, and copolymer grades fell to €1540 per metric ton. And you know what else? All grades were readily available. In fact, traders were actually stepping in to offer discounts on retail sales just to get inventory moving. The supply is sitting right there, but buyers just aren't biting.
Section 3, Turkey and China demand shifts, the Eastern slowdown.
As we take our global tour eastward, the Turkish bazaar completely echoed the West. Demand has severely shrunk. Because import offers were coming in much lower, Turkish buyers rightfully expected price drops, especially since there's just an abundant local supply right now. And those drops absolutely materialized. Homopolymer prices fell by $70 to $1,240 per metric ton, and copolymer grades tumbled by $110, landing at $1,380 per metric ton. When supply is that abundant and imports are cheap, buyers hold all the leverage for sure.
Moving further east to China, the demand can really only be described as lackluster. Buyers are showing virtually no willingness to purchase beyond the absolute bare minimum. They are strictly buying on a needs basis just to keep the factory lights on. This cautious approach has pinned Chinese spot prices at exactly 8,500 yuan per metric ton. There is absolutely no speculative buying happening, it's purely survival mode procurement.
Section 4, Spotlight, the Indian bazaar pulse, nuance and volatility.
Now, if the rest of the world seems to be following a pretty straightforward downward script, India is where the story gets highly nuanced. We're seeing conflicting market forces clashing in real time. First, imported overseas PP raffia offers have moved lower, with the latest market indications sitting around $1,225 per metric ton. But locally, Reliance Industries Limited, or RIL,
actually increased prices for all PP grades by 1 rupee per kilogram, effective June 22nd. So you've got cheaper imports battling a local price hike. Meanwhile, overall demand across bazaars is weak to moderate. This series of ex-works price hikes has created massive uncertainty among converters who fear further upward price drifts. Oh, and despite weak demand, there are persistent local shortages of film and CP grades.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact pain point for the Indian market right now. Listen to this direct quote from the report. Shortages of film and CP grades remained. However, sales of finished products did not improve. It's a brutal catch-22. Converters are struggling to source the raw materials they desperately need, like film and CP grades. But even when they get them, the end consumer just isn't buying the finished goods.
Section 5, Strategic Procurement Outlook, Navigating the Uncertainty.
So, the crucial point is how all this regional B2B data stacks up. When you look at the stark price declines across these major global hubs, it's obvious. You've got the steep drop to $1170 in the US, the discounted €1440 in Europe, and the falling $1240 in Turkey. The global trend for raw materials is heavily skewed downward due to stagnation. Yet, as we literally just saw in India, local realities can completely buck that global trend due to specific manufacturer hikes and grade shortages.
But wait, there's a massive macro geopolitical factor hanging over all of this. PolymerBazaar explicitly notes that recent developments and rising tensions in the Middle East are threatening severe volatility, particularly for Indian pricing circuits. If the supply situation doesn't improve, local producers are going to revise their ex-works prices accordingly.
So, based on PolymerBazaar's official procurement opinion, here's the strategic framework you need right now. Step 1. Actively review developments in the Middle East region. They are the ultimate wildcard. Step 2. Closely monitor your local supply situation and be hyper-vigilant of ex-works price revisions. And Step 3. Design a dynamic and responsive procurement policy. This is not the time for rigid purchasing. You need agility.
Which brings me to a final critical question for you. Knowing the data we've just walked through, the global slumps, the local hikes, the looming Middle East volatility, how resilient is your current procurement policy against sudden geopolitical shocks? If the answer is, I don't know or not very, it's time to adapt immediately. For the full PDF report of the data we covered today, make absolutely sure to visit www.polymerbazaar.com/future-trend/pp, or just head to polymerbazaar.com. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, stay agile, and I'll see you next time.